On the next ones, we're doing the composition of a trigonometric function and an inverse trigonometric function. And you would think that when I do one and I undo the other one that I always get the same answer. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't because of the discrepancy of which quadrants I have to stay in for my answers. So keeping in mind again that sine you have to be in quadrant 1 or quadrant 4, sine and tangent. Cosine you're in quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. And so I am going to first of all figure out what the sine of 3 pi over 4 is. So again, I'm going to use my table. Hopping over here, the sine of 3 pi over 4. So here's 3 pi over 4. It's 135 degrees. You could do 135 degrees on your calculator, but you need to change it from radians into degrees because our calculator's in degree modes. So cosine of 3 pi over 4 is going to be negative square root of 2 over 2. Oh, I'm doing sine. So you got to remember which one you're doing. And my board wanted to move. So sine of 3 pi over 4, going back over here. 3 pi over 4 of sine is square root of 2 over 2. So this answer here is square root of 2 over 2. I now want to do the inverse sine of square root of 2 over 2. So I want to keep in mind that when I do the inverse sine, since this is positive, I'm going to be in quadrant 1. And so I go over here and I'm looking for square root of 2 over 2. The inverse sine then is going to be pi over 4. So my answer here going to end up just being pi over 4. So the sine of 3 pi over 4 was square root of 2 over 2. But then when I did the inverse sine, I had to go back up to quadrant 1 since my sine was positive. And so the inverse sine of square root of 2 over 2 would give me pi over 4. 11, we're going to do cosine. First of all, we're going to find the cosine of 7 pi over 6. So 7 pi over 6, my cosine is going to be negative square root of 3 over 2. So I'm going to do the inverse or arc cosine of negative square root of 3 over 2. So again, I got to think about cosine. Cosine is going to be negative in quadrant 2. And so I'm going to look at my paper for quadrant 2 for negative square root of 3 over 2. So quadrant 2 would be right here between 120 and 180. I'm doing the inverse cosine. Negative square root of 3 over 2 is going to be 5 pi over 6. So 5 pi over 6 should be my answer there. The third one. On the third one, we're doing the inverse cosine of negative square root of 2 over 2. My cosine is negative in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2. And so on my paper, I'm looking for negative square root of 2 over 2 in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2, cosine negative square root of 2 over 2 would be at 3 pi over 4. So now I'm going to do, my board moved again, the cosine, cosine of 3 pi over 4. So now I'm going to go back to my paper. I'm going to look at 3 pi over 4. 3 pi over 4, I'm going to do the cosine. My cosine happens to still be negative square root of 2 over 2. So my answer here is negative square root of 2 over 2. That one's one where you happen to get the same number. Doesn't always happen that way. So, that's if I have to use my table. The next ones, we are going to use ones that we have to use our reference triangles to draw.